so excited to bring James Dack today because, James, you have such an interesting story. I just want to thank you for your time. We've got you straight out of the Woolloomooloo PCYC. You've come straight from training. You're still sweaty. You're in your PCYC shirt. So that is definitely going to be a topic of mine because you do so much for them. And I know it means a lot to you. So we want to go there. But I just want to explain, my podcast, mate, is about, there's a lot of teachers, coaches, business leaders, athletes, trainers, parents. Yeah. There's a lot of people that listen where I always ask myself in the back of my mind when we chat is, how is this helping someone else? So in all your answers, I know you do anyway because I know you and what you do away from here. I know how much you inspire other people, but just have that in the back of your mind. Every time I ask a question, I am thinking about who's listening. So the PCYC stuff we have to start with because you give so much to them. Could we go there, why it is? I mean, there's so much passion that comes out of you when we talk PCYC. It's so genuine to the point you've actually just sat here and you're still wearing it with pride. What is it about the PCYC? Can we go there to start with?
Oh, absolutely. It's an easy one to talk about. I suppose, thinking about, you coming here today, I sort of thought about what it was that you might want to talk about. This was one topic, I suspect. So when I was 8 years old, three things happened. I met a friend of mine, Alan Ferguson, that I talked to you about in the garage. We'll possibly talk about him later. He was one of my best mates, a beautiful, beautiful guy, great athlete. Second thing was someone gave me a Roosters t-shirt when I was 8, and I'll never forget. It was a screen printed red t-shirt, Eastern Suburbs District Junior Rugby League Football Club underneath, and a big rooster on the front, and it had its sort of chest out and its wings sort of out. And I sort of thought when I put that on, I felt like I was like 10 foot tall and bulletproof, and I wanted to be like that rooster with its chest out. And so that was sort of when I started following the Roosters. And the third thing was I walked through the doors of the Woolloomooloo PCYC. Now, a lot of kids, and I've got to be careful when I want to talk about this because my family situation wasn't the worst. Situation in the group of kids I grew up with. When you're in Department of Housing Commission. Homes which we're very grateful to have been given one when our family, a single parent mother, two bedroom terrace, 3 kids in one room and your mother in the other. It was something that we really appreciated, and being in that area of Woolloomooloo was the greatest. I even talk to mates about it now, how much fun and how much pleasure we got out of growing up together in that area, because there were places like the PCYC. And when you went there, you sort of jump up and down on a trampoline, you're drinking red cordial, you're laughing your lungs out, and you're to the point where you're almost sort of, dying of suffocation. You're laughing and jumping around that much, and the activity. But the thing for me, Hayden, was, it was respite from, situations at home that you might not want to be involved in. And that was similar for a number of us that went there. And then in that also you had some really lovely people that donated their time, and I'm talking about police and some of the volunteer staff there that were mentors. And for me, it was such a pleasurable experience as a kid that I wanted to somehow repay the favour at some point in my life for all the help that it gave me as a kid.
Yes.
So that's the essence of it, mate.
So what's your position now with the PCYC?
Well, I've always been involved with the Woolloomooloo Club. It was first sort of club established in 1937. It used to be an old sandstone police station, which is, now not that. But I've always been on the committee of the Woolloomooloo Club, and I was president there for a decade. Then I went back and had another stint as president. Yeah. But I'm still on the committee there. But I was asked several years ago to go on the board of directors of the PCYC New South Wales, which I've been on for I think 8 years now, off the top of my head.
Okay.
Might be a bit longer, but what we've done, through not just me, mate. There's been some magnificent people, incredibly well led by Nicole Silbara from Macquarie Bank. She's the chairperson. She's like phenomenal. CEO just left, Dom Teakle, who has been fabulous, and a whole host of other people that are really smart at what they do, and subsequently that's transcending into the growth of the organisation.
How big is it now?
There's 71 clubs.
71 clubs you sit across, and
Yeah.
you still, I'll tell the listeners, I think we may have first met, I might have been with Brad Fittler in possibly a City Origin team, or definitely a New South Wales Origin team. We always use a facility, and we're in there punching away, and then there's Dacky in the corner on the punching bag, and I know Freddie has so much respect for you. You have a history with him that was quite clear, and you're both very similar in how much you give. You're givers, always doing stuff for other people. But yeah, that's where we first met. So to the listeners, you're still in there every day. Is that right? You're still in there training?
I try to, mate. I think that the push and shove of life, I find that as I said to a mate of mine the other week, it's cheaper than the therapist.
Yeah.
And you go in there and you sort of decompress.
Yeah.
I go in there just, the mental gymnastics of, did a cross-training session with a guy from Soul Train up top, and then I might do some boxing with Driscoll and a couple of other friends. But it's just that mental health aspect, apart from the fitness aspect, that just counterbalances all the push and shove of life.
Well, and it obviously gives you great memories every time you walk in there.
I
childhood memories.
I love it, Hayden. I love it. I mean, it's just so many people that I've met, wonderful people, so many pictures, so much memorabilia. I get a real kick when I walk into it, and not so much when I walk out, I'm sweating and sort of exhausted, but, grab a cup of coffee and try and reboot. But it's just there's a lot of intangible, emotional joy that comes from the walls of that particular club and the whole organisation, mate. It's just we built a club at Wagga recently. It's phenomenal for those listening to the podcast. If you look online, it's a brand new club that in that community. It's just such a joy for me to see a facility like that delivered to a community like Wagga, and we've got a number of others on foot at the moment. We're building another one in Parramatta at the moment, or not at the moment, but it's on the drawing board, and it will come into fruition. One in Dubbo, and places where the police have given us a sort of strategic heat map, if you like, about where they're needed. And then we try to deliver them for those communities.
Well, I can't think of a perfect member to have on the board who actually lived. I mean, you mentioned the word respite there for kids. Yeah. So there's obviously, usually I'd go with a guest I'd get to know and hear a bit about their life, but you almost basically said it there. There was reasons why. There's obviously some tough upbringings going on for kids that you grew up with that went there for the respite. But then you talk about it with such fond memories too, like how much fun that place is for a kid, the mentors that are in there. I guess for a couple of hours a day for those kids, that's their happy place. That's probably leads me to, like, there's so much passion you have for that place when I've met you in there. Last time I was in there with Steve Driscoll, and he always helps us out with the Origin team. I love Steve. Stevie, if you're listening, we need you on the show. You are going to be a fascinating guest.
Phenomenal, Driscoll. I don't know how.
So he tells me, last time I was in there, he says, you know about Dacky in this place? And I said, oh, kind of. Like, Freddie's told me a little bit. He goes, you know, he lived in that room there for a while.
Yeah. With my brother.
Could you share that with the listeners? You actually, for a long time, lived in what is now the change rooms of. When we all went in there, we did our session, we go in, have a shower, and then we went out, and usually with Freddie, we'll go and feed the homeless or do something that's a day for us in camp where we bond through hard work, but we also do some good things for other people. That means a lot to him. And I think you were a big part of that when we all started this. But Driscoll was telling me, see this area where you're getting changed. Dacky lived there. Tell me about that.
It's a funny one, Hayden. And just on the topic of Freddie, he's one of the nicest and most talented guys I've met in all sorts of different ways, and a wonderful family man as well. I've great admiration and respect and love for that guy. And I was actually hurt by the recent sort of pile on the media and all that sort of stuff. But that's for another time. But so got to a point where my mother passed away and my sister moved down, and we've got this 3-bedroom terrace in Wollongong. And I said to my brother, I said, look, we've actually got to get out of here. And he looked at me and said, where do we go? And I said, I'm not sure. I said, but us two here in a 3-bedroom house, there's some needy families out there, and we should, and there were a couple of reasons behind it. That was predominantly the first one, because there were some needy families. I knew that. We were very, very needy when we first went in, but not so much at that time. And I said, mate, we've just got to cut it and jump off the cliff and then just see what happens, So I went to the Department of Housing place and I said, look, we're going to quit the house. And the guy said, are you sure? There's a waiting list. I said, mate, yeah. I said, there's more needy people than us. And my brother was a bit nervous. And to be honest with you, I was like quivering inside about the actual leaving. And, I thought to myself, we can't stay here in this house, A, but B, I wanted to break the cycle of being dependent.
How old were you?
Probably early 20s.
Right, and the brother, how old was your brother?
He would have been 18.
Okay, so you're basically looking after the family, is that
when my mother passed away, my brother and sister were still at school, so that's, when I had to get a job at St Vincent's Hospital, we touched on earlier.
Yeah, we'll definitely go there.
So talking to the manager at the PCYC, strangely, the building was, after hours being broken into and people were using it. They're not just training and doing sort of stuff, it was just local people jumping through the window and stuff. And he said, look, some of the stuff's getting damaged. And I said, look, we're about to quit our house at Wollongong. He said, he was shocked. He said, mate, are you sure? And I told him why. And he said, look, why don't you come and stay here for a bit and, you and your brother and sort of look after the club? Because, mate, what we will save in damages with you two being here as sort of pseudo, security types, will offset, what it might cost us, in potential rent. And I said, oh, mate, wow, that's great. So that area used to be a storeroom where we lived, and I got a mate of mine to come in and put some carpet down, and then we got a bar fridge and a toaster and a little TV and a bed and a couch and this and that, and stuck it in there. And it was I tell you, Hayden, it was like heaven on earth with my brother and I. We get up and play racquetball at 4:30 in the morning and have breakfast, and then subsequently, go to work, all ready to go, And it was a really special time for me. It was really enjoyable, and that's the essence of it, mate. We were there for probably just over a year and a bit. They wanted us to stay on, but I thought, no, can't keep doing this.
So you go in there now after a workout, and you go in the showers, and that's where you used to sleep, just over there by the locker room.
Absolutely.
Wow.
It was a special time, mate. It really was. And as we were talking before about people with money, without money, and all that sort of stuff. And I know a lot of people with a lot of money, and I know a lot of people without it. But essentially, people are either good, bad, or indifferent, regardless of how wealthy or otherwise they are. And that's how. And I know you do. I've seen you. I've heard a lot about you, mate. And that's why I'm sitting here, to be honest with you. And that's how I judge people. What's under the bonnet, who you are, how you deliver yourself, how you look after the people around you, your family, all that sort of stuff. That's essentially it for me. So it taught me a lot, mate. It taught me a lot. As I say, it was just, those were like golden years of my life. And on the odd occasion, I've said, the best years of my life were when I grew up in Wollongong. What about us being married? And I said, well, no, I mean like as a kid. Talking about as a kid, of course.
Yeah. You just reminded me. I once rang I rang my wife after the World Cup final of the 2008. I was working with the Kiwi team against Australia, and which was a strange feeling. But there was Wayne Bennett, an Aussie. There was myself, an Aussie, and anyway, you know what it's like when you've worked with someone a long time. There was Nathan Kalis was the captain, and I'd been through a lot with him.
Roosters?
Yeah, no, his brother Jason played at the Roosters.
Okay.
Yeah, so Nathan was the captain of the Kiwis, but also the Eels, and we'd worked together such a long time. I know I've gone off your story here.
No.
But I made the mistake of, because we'd been through so much, and I knew he'd been through so much, and even that camp, he'd been through so much. When he won that trophy, like, and it was history. Like New Zealand have never won it.
Phenomenal.
But because I'd know the sacrifices he'd been through and I'd shared a lot, this like joy just came over me, and I'm on the phone and I said to my wife, "That's the best moment of my life."
Wrong.
Meanwhile, we'd only a month before the camp just had our third child, which again, she's such a champion mum. I'd even left her at home with 3 kids under 3, and I'm off enjoying the world and the World Cup and whatever. Like, she's a champion. And so you imagine her on the end of the phone going,
not happy.
Hang on. I said, no. I mean, like, my working life.
Rookie mistake, mate.
We got married, we had kids.
Yeah.
But sorry, I just digressed because you gave me I mean, you've had all sorts of sports. You've had the Silk Tails, you've had New South Wales Origin, City Origins, you've had AFL. Like, so many people have come through there. It's a great place to go, great facility. But in the photos, I love looking around old boxing gyms and their photos on the wall. But I've seen one of yourself, Driscoll, and Toby Green from the Giants, the AFL. Now, he's a legend of that club. He's the best. He's one of I haven't had any AFL people on the show, but Toby Green, if you're watching, you're welcome anytime. I might call you to get him on. But what's the relationship with him? Because that clearly popped out at me, that photo.
Well, a friend of mine is the deputy chairman of the Giants. He actually wasn't at the time. I think he was on the board, and he's through his efforts and energy, Adrian Fonseca got elevated to the deputy chairman role. Should be chairman soon, I'd hope, with I think Tony Shepherd, who's a phenomenon in himself and a legend, is about to step down, and that chairman's role becomes vacant. But you've got, I met, through Adrian and his wife Nancy, we were introduced to the club back in 2016, and I offered.
Won that grand final.
Oh yeah.
We don't go there. It looks painful to talk about. Sorry, mate. Sorry, mate.
So exactly. So what happened was, I offered to the Giants people were so generous to myself and my wife Mary that inviting us out to games and coming out to the box, this, that, and the other. I thought, well, I'm going to actually add some value myself, and they sort of weren't sure about it until post the event when. They actually, I did a training session for them. I was channeling Hayden Knowles. That we did a CrossFit to warm up, sort of cross training for half an hour up at the top level of the club, and then we came down and we split them up and did some boxing and wrestling, and then we got them all into the boxing room. We had a thing called the Ring of Fire. Everyone stood around, and this mate of mine, I'm sure you've done this, calls out 2 people he think that should probably punch on, and they just punch on, and he'll call it when he thinks it's enough, and they might not think it's enough, but he'll think that's enough. But there's a photo of all of us standing around in a circle, and Toby, oh God, he would have been, he must have been like 19 or 18 or something or other, and you could tell. There was a handful of them, Steve Cornelio and Shane Mumford and all these guys. It was just a phenomenal sort of group of talented young guys that were. And anyway, they called this training session. They actually had a fly-on-the-wall camera. I didn't realise at the time, but they videoed the whole session, and they've still got it on their website. And they called it Out of the Comfort Zone. And in that, I got to know some of these players. Lockie Whitfield and all these guys like Harry Himmelberg and so forth, these phenomenal athletes and great people, mate. And you know, I seem to have this, connection, if you like, with Toby, and we kept sort of catching up every now and then, and then we started sort of doing some boxing with each other, and I just felt like, look, at the time, a couple of years ago, I thought he was one of the most misunderstood people I've ever met, because my view of him is quite a shy sort of a bloke and a sort of a, I'll lead through my actions and that's how I'm going to do it, Other than that, that's sort of where I think where he saw it. But what happens is people like him, because they're such natural leaders, everyone sort of gravitates to the conclusion that this guy should be the captain of the club, and he's done it so brilliantly, mate. We'd catch up every now and then, and, that photo you saw with me, him and Driscoll, and there was one with Harry Hillenberg. There've been a half a dozen of those, and, in introducing him to Driscoll and a handful of other friends and so forth, you actually get tidbits from everybody. And I think that from his own observations that, that everybody wanted him to be the captain of the club, and then it came to the conclusion himself. He just realised, I have to be this. And you could almost see the cogs turning in his head.
Yes.
You would talk about you in training, you sort of have a coffee afterwards, and you'd see the cogs turning in his head about, how am I going to do this? And then it was all him. It was just he was just a great athlete, great bloke, misunderstood for a while, and now I think the real Toby Green has been conveyed to the media, and then he's just the person he always was, mate. From my perspective, he's the person he always was.
Well, that's an interesting point, because there's a bit of a myth that all leaders have to be so perfect in all these ways, and they're loud but he was very shy and very quiet, but he led through actions.
Yeah.
He was the hardest worker. So he had traits of a real leader, but then in the current world in high profile sport, he had to learn some other things, obviously. And everyone, for me, leadership is everyone's on a journey. Like, you're a great leader of people on a different stage of your journey than what he is, but everyone's on a different journey, but he was a leader that I'd love to get him on the show, because that is a topic that a lot of my listeners are into learning about.
You guys got a lot in common. And I think he'd love to meet you because of your background. I mean, I've been at dinner. We went out dinner with some different people, and and one of them was Sterling Mortlake, captain Australian Wallabies. Another guy was Jeff Dixon, who'd used to run Qantas, and we've been out to dinner, and he could see him like just learning, and he's a really smart cookie. I mean, as I say, he's got a lot under the bonnet, that guy, and people are just starting to realise who he is now.
So some of those times in your life, you mentioned where your mother passed away and you're basically looking after a younger brother, younger sister. So you went to work.
Yeah.
Sorry, we might as well go back to schooling. So Dad's not around. So Mum looked after you and put you through private school.
Don't
right?
know how she did it, mate. It was. I think to the point where she worked. She worked as a cleaner at Stock Exchange late at night and come home sort of early in the morning. And she, the funny thing about her, mate, that I noticed, I'm just in awe of her as a person, how strong she was, how proud she was, always had us well-dressed, well-fed. Private schools, my head spins when I think about it, to be honest with you.
How did she do
I don't know, mate. I don't know. So she never had a boyfriend after my father left, never had a man in the house or any of that sort of stuff. And I'm just like she dedicated her whole life to us to the point where I believe that she became ill and unfortunately passed away with cancer because she was so stressed and dedicated to us and it was a hard road, mate. Like 3 kids and private schools and on your own and
so working on numerous jobs to fund this.
Didn't have any support from my brother and I used to sort of say your father, like it's not my father, he's your father, as a joke amongst ourselves. Hardly any support from him, if almost negative support. And I don't know how she did it, mate, but she got ill. Unfortunately, she passed away when I was 20, and my brother and sister were still at school, which sort of led into me having to get a job, which I did do, as a porter at St Vincent's Hospital, which was...
And there's a great story that we probably should share, because there's a little nugget of gold there. You had a decision to make. But could you tell me what the porter did, and when you bumped into the CEO? It's a bit of a life-changing moment when you think about it, that moment when you bumped into the CEO. I've heard the story from Steve Driscoll, who told me before I came here, but I need to hear it from you. You were working as a porter at St Vincent's Hospital.
Yeah, you know, look, it was one of those sort of jobs where, you know, the paycheck job, you know, each fortnight you get paid and you think, oh, thank God I got paid for this. You know, it was sort of, pardon me, it was, I call it a dead end job, you know, needed to pay the bills, got the job, you know, so on. So I'm sort of dragging myself around the place, and, you know, I dropped a patient off to what used to be called the Cameron wing, where they did all the heart transplants. Dropped the patient off up there on a bed, and there was a ramp between the main hospital and the Cameron wing, and as I'm coming back, I've jumped on the back of the bed with bumpers on it, and I'm riding the bed down this ramp going, I thought 100 kilometres an hour, probably a bit less, and I'm bumping into the walls and all this stuff, and out of, like, in the peripheral vision, I've seen someone at the end of the corridor, and I've jumped off the back of the bed and pulled the thing up just, you know, without a metre away from him, you know. And this guy looks at me in a stern sort of fashion, and he said, who are you? And because I'm like 17, 18, got a chip on my shoulder the size of the Harbour Bridge, who are you? And he sort of says, I'm the CEO of the hospital, I'm John Ireland. And I said, oh, hi, I'm James Dack. And he said, I want to see you in my office tomorrow morning, you know, bright and early, you know. And I thought, oh. So my mother was in hospital at the time, I'll never forget it, and I'm lying in bed and I'm rolling around, I'm thinking, oh, I don't need to go and see that guy, you know, who's he think he is? And, you know, I'm sort of an angry kid, mum's in hospital, kids are at school, I've got a dead-end job. I'm lying there, and I sort of had this moment where, you know, and I call them moments of truth, and I've had several of them. I know you've had several of them, you know, that fight you had that you won at Paris.
The listeners have never heard about that.
You've got to talk about that. That's a great story. So, you know, I'm in bed, as I say, moment of truth. I'm deciding whether I'm actually going to go into his office and confront him. And then I thought, what would my mother want me to do? And she said, you've got to be a man in every situation. Even though I'm sort of 17 years old at this time, I thought, you know what? I'm going to follow her advice. I'm just talking to myself in my head. It's just all head noise. Yeah. But I know she'd want me to do that. So I got dressed, you know, I'm going to be a man. I go in his office, bang on the time. I sit there, and we spoke for 3 hours. Now, John Ireland, who's Daniel Anderson's father-in-law, is one of the most compassionate and passionate and empathetic and kind people I've ever met. And I'm still in contact with him. We've been out to lunch. The human resources manager at St Vincent's Hospital, Ian Thorley's a friend of John's. The three of us go out to lunch. We went out probably the last time 3 or 4 months ago. So when I was 17, you know, met him, and we're still friends. Now, in my life, I mean, John's not a wealthy guy. He's got a great family, and he's a very loving and caring human being for everybody. And I wanted to be like him, you know. So after we met 3 hours, sorry, that was my phone. After we met for 3 hours, he actually, strangely, promoted me, gave me a promotion. He said, you're an intelligent kid. He said, you've got a bit of go in you, you're optimistic and all that sort of stuff. I said, yeah, thanks. So next thing you know, I'm working in a clerical position, and then I got promoted into the pay office as a clerk in the pay office. And strangely, to fast track the story, 5 years later, I'm the payroll manager. So I'm responsible for 2,500 people at St Vincent's Hospital. I've got 4 or 5 people working for me. And 5 or 6 years down the track, I was poached by the Department of Health in the Industrial Relations Division. And how that happened was a group of all the payroll managers come together and discuss their issues. And then these people thought, well, this guy's, you know, a bit different, you know, in a good way. And invited me in to talk with them, and basically created a position for me that ran all New South Wales public hospital payroll. So, pardon me, I had again, half a dozen people working for me, and all the people from the payroll, all the payroll managers of all the hospitals in New South Wales not reported to me, but would ring me about queries and how to manage things and all that sort of stuff. So national wage increases, I was responsible for all that sort of stuff, award increases. And there were varying awards from cleaners through to specialists.
They deserve so much more, don't they? All those people that you're paying in that medical system.
Oh, incredible, mate.
Like what they're doing. And I said this only recently to my wife, some of the positions out there, I think there was some strikes going on. I saw something on the side of an ambulance or something. These people deserve so much more. Like, I'm working in elite sport, and to think about the money that we earn in elite sport compared to what someone's earning saving lives and like the police force, for example, like what they're doing. And I've seen it firsthand. Like, my wife worked in that space for a long time, and you see the type of shifts they do, the type of stuff they have to handle, the type of damage that can do to them. They deserve so much more money, and you were the one fighting to get them all pay increases. And
oh, not so much me doing that, mate. I was basically affecting the increase for them, through the payroll system from a mechanical point of view.
Right.
Not so much that, but everything you've said, I agree with completely. They're just phenomenal human beings. I don't know if I could do it, to be honest. People come in to the emergency centre at St Vincent's, the casualty ward, from having an accident or whatever the case may be, and these people are in pieces, and they're just cool as a cucumber, trying to put them all back together. I don't know if I can manage that.
Well, mate, you know what? There's a great friend of mine, Craig Catterick, who you see him on all the. You see him in the Origins or the Test matches in the orange shirt, the medical guy on the field,
he's a great bloke. I've heard a lot about him. I actually met him for the first time up in Adelaide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great bloke. Yeah. So he just, I'm digressing, but some stories of being on the field with him, where my role on field, if you ever see me in that role, is I'm basically just delivering coaches' messages. I'm not medical at all. All I'm doing is, so if Freddie radios through, I say exactly what he says. If he says, go and tell the halfback this, that's my on-field role. The most valuable person on the field at that moment in an off, besides a player, that medical guy, that players can feel safe with. Craig has a background in emergency nursing. He has a background as a police officer. He has all sorts of, he's got a fair background, but on field, I've been on the field where a player he's unconscious, he's broken his neck, and I'm out there, basically I have to assist, right? But to see Craig so calm at that moment, and to be able to communicate with the doctor, with the trainer, with the other guy, you do this, you do this, you do this, hey, and then there was another time there's a player's legs facing the other way, and like I can't even look at it. But
crazy.
He's like very calm, makes the player feel okay, feels safe. Hey, everything will be okay, and you do this, you do this, you do this. Those people are so special. In fact, I should make an effort on the podcast to go and talk to a person in that space, because they have amazing skills.
Yeah, it's funny how people have that cool under pressure sort of nerve. I actually met. Lucky to have met the guy who was the cave diver for that soccer team that got caught.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, and I asked him that question, and he said, I don't even think about it. I said to him, have you ever, in that situation, you had to go in a couple of times and bring the kids out? What they did, they dove into the cave, obviously, and I think one I know for sure, but maybe two of the two divers were killed trying to do it, local divers, and these guys were specialists, cave divers that the Australian guys that got them out, but they had to anaesthetise them more or less, and then through these narrow channels in pitch black, just like. And I said to him, mate, was there a moment where you actually second guessed yourself, where you panicked, he said, no. He said, there's no time for that. He said, once you start going down that path,
Wow.
You know, but then like
Yeah,
Craig, I had the great fortune to have met him in Adelaide, and I'd heard a lot about him anyway, just along the lines of what you said. It was just it was great to meet him.
Yeah, he's a great fella. Great fella. So back to that story. So that was a bit of a life-changing moment. You said to me that you were thinking about not turning up for that meeting.
Yeah.
The CEO said, "I'll see you at 9 o'clock."
Yeah.
You were almost going to say, "Nah, that's it." Like sleepless night the night before, not keen on, but you just fronted up to it. And what a life-changing moment, because
It was
your career. Then, I mean, very, very successful in many ways since. But do you look back at that moment as a changing moment?
I do.
Does John know this? Have you expressed that to him?
He does.
Yeah,
he does.
Right.
He does. I mean, when I recently got that King's birthday honour, I rang him straight away as soon as I got an email, and I said, "Mate, this is you. This is sort of, you know, in my mind, you know, a payback reward for your effort and energy that you put into me when I was 17. This is sort of the culmination of all those, you know, wonderful things you've done in your life, you know, resulted in," and I'm sure there are several other people that have rung him to thank him for his kindness as well. I'm sure it's not just me, but for me, it was, I rang him and I said, "Mate, thank you, and this is what's happened. And it may never have happened if you hadn't spent that time with me that day in the corridor, and subsequently we met the next morning." You know, everything, you know, it's like sliding doors, you know. Moments of truth are key, mate, because that moment for me, as you pointed out just then, was pivotal in terms of where I'm sitting right now in front of you. If I didn't turn up, I don't know what would have happened, mate, but I don't know, I just found my mother, her strength and energy channeled through me. I channeled that, you know, into me, and I subsequently I turned up. So I was just lucky. I don't know if it's lucky, but it set a platform of, you know, fronting up to everything and anything that might be palatable or unpalatable or challenging.
Yeah.
No matter what it is, and I prepared myself for it, you know, with that, in that moment, being 17 and being, you know, in that headspace and all the rest of it, with my kid, with his brother and sister at school and my mother in hospital, etc. And as I said to you before, mate, I don't want any sympathy or empathy from anybody. I've had a great life. I've had a wonderful upbringing, wonderful kid, great mother, not so great father. But you know, there were other people in that area that were less fortunate than our family. You know, you know, I had my mother till I was 20, and she was a phenomenon. Some people didn't have that, you know, even have that. Yeah.
So you have there's some. I love talking to you, mate, because you always. There's some challenges you went through, and we don't even have time to go through all of them. But you always spin it back to being very optimistic of opportunities and very grateful of. You're always very grateful, and then you're always thinking of other people doing it harder. Like there's other people that wouldn't. There's a way you think. I don't know what was the influence. That's all your mum's influence.
Yeah, I think so, mate. I've just noticed in my life from people that I respect and have spent time with, that optimism, you know, it turns into sort of opportunity. You know, no one wants to spend time with someone that's sort of dragging their heels and sort of complaining and carrying on. You know, and I've sort of never been like that, I suppose. Maybe a couple of close mates might tell you different, but you know, I just think that permeates into, you know, having a nice life, mate. You know, successful people around you. You want to bring that to the table. You know, and I don't know. As I say, I think it came from my mother. She was a proud woman, hardworking woman, honest woman, and all of those sort of things, you know, helped me be the person I am.
So after that career, what made the career change? Was it after that in the medical system you then went real estate?
Yeah.
Yep.
So you know, like a lot of things in life, mate, I know you love a challenge, and sort of so do I. So then I was playing touch football with a mate who was in real estate, and he said to me, "You'd be great at real estate," and I said, "Sure," you know. And then we talked more about it, and it got more serious, and it got to a point where I was helping. He'd left the company that he was involved with, and I was helping him in his company that he just started in real estate, and it wasn't doing all that well, to be honest with you. But then a couple of things happened. It was complete like timing dynamic shift, and this guy, unfortunately, his father passed away, and on the back end of that there was an estate, and he was left an amount of money. And at the same time, the previous company that he'd worked for, the principal of that company had contracted AIDS, and he was it was a boutique firm in Paddington, and so he wanted to sell his company.
Yeah.
Then his father passed away, left him the money to be able to buy the company. So it came together like that, and I don't know. I mean, I'm one of those guys that, you know, you just jump off the cliff when you need to. You know what I mean? And you hope you fly.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? Like, I'm looking around, and I quite like the idea of the real estate. It gives you freedom. It's sort of the last bastion of the entrepreneur. The harder you work, supposedly, the more you make, and all that type. I like that. Yeah. From a work ethic perspective. So I became the founding partner in that business, and it was a gee whiz. It was a wild ride, Hayden, mate. I was working 7 days a week, and as I say to a lot of guys in sport and stuff, like the Flegg guys, the Roosters guy, I hope they win the comp. They're a great bunch of kids. It's nosebleed commitment, mate. Nosebleed commitment, which is what I had to have for this real estate thing, because it was all encompassing, mate. It's like, you know, every time you went into someone's house as a job interview, and you either came out with it or you didn't, and then you had to, if you didn't, then you had to in my mind, I've got almost like a videotape of what I did wrong, so that I'd correct it, and the next time I'd be better, and the next time I'd be better, to the point where I just drove myself crazy, wanting to be the best I could be. So ended up, you know, for the 20 years that we were in the company, I was the number one salesperson. I was sales manager, you know, for a bit too.
You won all awards. I did a little bit of research. You a huge, like, most successful real estate in Sydney. So, but you've in and amongst that, without even needing to talk how big that got, and money, like, you obviously did very well out of it. We don't even need to go there. You just delivered some gold to anyone in any sport or any business. You said it's something that we're big on. You must have talked to Freddie 1,000 times, because there's something Freddie and I are both big on with any teams we work in. It's first impressions. And you just said it in a way where every time you walked into a house, it was like a job interview. You had a first impression to give. And then not only that, you then reviewed it and analysed it and how to get better. If you're a young athlete right now, and you're a young, let's say you mentioned Roosters, so let's talk rugby league. There's a lot of listeners rugby league. Every kid, every time he turns up to training, in particular if he gets invited into a camp or under 17s or 9, it doesn't matter, emerging origin camp, doesn't matter. You have a first impression that you give off through how you look, how you present, your first action, the energy you give, how well you communicate. And everything is then being reviewed and analysed, and the best ones are doing their own review and analysis and how can I get better. But whether you like it or not, there's coaches and people analysing you all the time. And you just said it in a way where I've had Cameron Murray on this show before, where only on the Audible version, but there's a great story of where we had him in an emerging camp once, and the first impression we ever had gave us reason to trust him. The first impression, how he trained, how he ran to the drill, how much energy he gave, how much attention to detail he put into the drills. He was a young kid at the time. You could see his character. Then we brought him into the PCYC and we put him in the boxing ring. And
we brought in a world-ranked boxer at the time. He was number 4 in the world, Bilal Akaway. We brought him in. You were there, I think, watching this night. But we actually went to Bilal and I said to him, mate, could you put some pressure on this young kid? We want to see how he goes under pressure. So Bilal went to town on body shots only, and Cameron Murray would not take a backward step. He was just fronting up the whole time, and he would not stop either until I walked over and tapped him on the shoulder, said, hey, that's enough. He wouldn't stop. So the whole time the head coach is watching, and he's giving Freddie reason to trust him. Like, that was evidence. I can trust this kid. He'll never stop. He'll never give up. How we saw him in emerging camp only 2 or 3 years earlier. There's all these reasons why you trust this bloke. But he gave so many first impressions that then there was this moment in Origin in a game where Tedesco scores in the corner. One of the most famous memories ever we have in Origin was 30 seconds to go. It was 20-all at the time, and Tedesco scores.
I think Freddie ran onto the field.
Freddie ran on the field. I had to tell him get off because I was worried they were going to take the try away.
I love that bloke.
But the story that I'm getting at that relates to your work in the real estate was there was about 10 minutes before that where Cameron Murray was so fatigued that I'm running off the field going, hey, Freddie, you might want to look at an interchange. I'll keep going. I'll keep him going. I'll go and talk to him, but keep an eye on him. And did that a couple of times. Freddie goes, no, I trust him. I trust him.
Wow.
So we made another interchange and we left him out there. But the word trust came because of all the reasons, the first impression that we had of him so long ago. We now trust him for this moment. I don't know if you remember, Boyd Cordner, one of the best leaders of all time, plays the ball, a tough carry. He always put his hand up, give me that carry.
Freak.
The next play, Cameron Murray, under so much fatigue, the attention to detail in his catch, listening and communicating with Mitchell Pearce, called the play. The ability to catch it and pass it under that level of fatigue, because remember I told you for 10 minutes before he was on his knees.
Yeah.
He made that pass that everyone remembers, the Tedesco try, Blake Ferguson running down the sideline. Not many people remember the Cam Murray moment, but I do because there's such a backstory. There's such a backstory of the reason why he was trusted was there was a first impression, and it was an emerging camp of young kids. It was a first impression he gave. So all these kids every day, we always say that you can give a first impression with your every day, with how your first action, as soon as you cross the training line, your first action is a first impression to your teammates. And that builds trust in each other. But you just said it in a way that I think relates to every industry. I've gone off on a tangent there talking rugby league, but you've said it in a way where first impression in any industry.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And you ended up so successful. We don't need to.
Yeah, thanks,
people can Google that if they want.
Work that out. But you know, it's funny. Like, there's a couple of stories there that, you know, I love league. You know, it taught me a lot of lessons as a kid. But you know, talk about Brad Fittler. I don't remember if you remember the time, and I can't remember whether it was the second series that we won when we got beaten in the first game and then we went to Perth. Do you remember that? And he made all those changes.
7 changes.
So I had a mate of mine out of Perth who'd been diagnosed. It was terminally ill, unfortunately, and a great bloke. And Brad had met him before. He rang me from Perth. He said, "Oh, Dacky, is there any chance you can get me a couple of tickets to Origin?" And blah 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 blah. And I said, "Oh, gee, you know, Brad's under a lot of pressure at the moment. Name's Kerry Billsborough." I said, "Kez, he's, you know," I said, "but I'll ring him and see how it pans out, you know." I said, but there's no guarantee. He wanted to take his son. He wanted to have that proud moment, father-son, go to the game and sort of show his son, like, and he was. He was, you know, Kerry was a really great bloke. And anyway, Brad had met him, fortunately. And I rang Brad and I said, "Look, you know, unfortunately, you know, Kerry's, you know, terminal, and you know, I know you're under the pump, mate." I said, I haven't promised him anything, but, you know, anyway. To cut a long story short, so I think the game was played on Wednesday. I get a call from, you know, Kerry, you know, "Have you heard anything from Brad?" I said, "Look, mate, you've just got to let it sit." I said, "I don't know if we're going to hear from him or not." I said, "He's getting bashed up in the media because he lost the first game. He's made a half a dozen changes. for the second game.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he's even got time to breathe, let alone think of you and me, right?
Yeah.
So the next day, Tuesday, he calls me, man, is there any chance that, he had his young bloke and he was obviously anxious because he hadn't had long for this world to go, himself. So anyway, late Tuesday afternoon, I get a text from Brad, can you text me Kerry's mobile number? I text him his mobile number. Brad calls this guy on the Tuesday night before the game, brings his son into the hotel, sits down with him, personally gives him 2 tickets, gives him a jersey, has 2 or 3 others, Bezzy, who I love, Danny Badiris, and a couple of other guys sat down with him, had a glass of water with the kid and sort of talked about the game and this and that. I was blown away. And that's the character that Fitler's got.
Always gives his time.
Do you know what I'm saying? He's just got so much character and so much knowledge, and he's one of the best New South Wales coaches we've ever had. But you talk about that, and the second thing we talked about downstairs, when you look at all the pictures, it was this Alan Ferguson, who's a mate of mine, an Indigenous kid, phenomenon. I met him when I was 8 years old, played for Mount Carmel. I don't even know how I got there, Hayden. My mother took me down to Mount Carmel school. Didn't go to the school. Next thing, I'm playing for their rugby league team. Next thing, we win the comp. And I was that dumb and clunky. We won the comp. Alan Ferguson, this mate of mine, Fergo, had scored about 150 tries. The tactic was pass it to Fergo.
Give the ball to him.
Bang, pass it to bang. Anyway, we won the comp, and I said, who do we play? I was that dumb. Who do we play next week?
Yeah.
Mate, it's over. We've won it. I was like, oh, okay. but Fergo, him and I met up again when we went to high school at St Mary's Cathedral, and I told you about the story when I got picked in the Roosters. Very proud moment, mate. Very proud moment. Got picked in the Roosters SG ball side with another friend of mine, Peter Chidiac, and Alan Ferguson and another guy called Tony Stutton got picked for South, and the 4 of us were up on the balcony at school, and they were sort of presenting us to the school, and these guys were representing a letter from the sports master. I'm thinking, this is wow, look at this. And then afterwards, when it all died down and we were walking back down the stairs, I said to Fergo, who I'd love dearly, is like a brother to me. I said to him, mate, what about that? I said, pretty good, eh? And he said, you? I said, yeah, me. He goes, mate, you're a disappointment. I said, what do you mean? He said, mate, you let people down every time you play. He said, you're half fit, you wander around. He said, you're not even, you're not connected to the game. You're letting your teammates down. And I said, are you serious? He said, yeah, mate, I am. And I swear to you, it was like a sledgehammer, and it split me in half. And I went home and I thought, I've got this bag, I've got this jacket, I've got all this stuff. And I thought, for one of my best mates to say that to me, I worked out that he loved me so much that he wanted the best for me, right? So from that moment, I played that year and I was okay. I was actually average, to be honest. I played that year, and then a couple of years later, I had a moment where I was trying out for the Roosters under 23s, and there were 250 people trialling, mate, and it got possibles, probables, and then that game happened and it crunched down to about 70 players, and I was still in the mix, and I thought, I'm going to do this. Like, in myself, I swear to you, it took everything in me, because the competition then was so full on. Like, there were so many talented players. It was like I was almost like an out of body experience. Yeah. And I was actually fit because I'd learned the lesson from Fergo. I was ready for this. Yeah. And thankfully I got picked and graded, and I thought, and I take it right back to that moment where he hit me between the eyes, mate, like nothing ever, and I'll never forget it. He's not with us anymore, Fergo. He actually, when he was 15, he was a beach sprint champion, and he was that good. Him and his 2 brothers, Warren and Gilbert, always played representative football. And they were just the most talented family. Anyway, Channel 7 came in and they had a sports show. It might have been Wild World of Sport or wherever it was. Yeah. And they interviewed the 3 of them. They called them the Flying Fergusons. And I think between the 3 of them, I know Cam Murray played for Mascot, but Fergo's a bit of a legend in Mascot and South's SG Ball. He kicked to win the SG Ball grand final. They scored in the corner, kicked in the mud, kicked the goal from a sideline with an old leather football, and kicked the goal to win by a point. So he's quite well known, and there was a podcast that I think Nigsy Hill did with who were the best ever players in SG ball for South, and Fergo was one of them. They brought him up, and Mario Fennick talks about him. I love anyway. So when he was a beach sprint champion, he had a heart murmur, and I didn't think much of it at the time, but now I reflect on it. He actually passed away with a heart attack at a young age.
At a young age.
You know.
Well, I saw the picture when I've entered you. I've seen the picture that means so much.
You should put it on your podcast.
I will, and he's carrying a leather ball, the old leather ball that you mentioned.
They got this thing about them, mate. Like, you know, I call it the indigenous antenna, where they all seem to know what they're doing. And then that photo that you saw, that's one of my favourite sporting photos, other than the one when Freddie scored that try, got his arm in the air when he charged down Darren Lockie's kick when he was playing for New South Wales. That ball, that photo with Alan Ferguson with the ball in his hand like that, and you had George Longbottom and Kevy Stewart, who was a terrific 5'8", playing for SG ball for South at the time. And South does great on me saying the word South, believe me, being a Roosters guy. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
Let's be clear.
Because for the listeners that don't follow rugby league, there's a huge rivalry here.
Huge,
Huge,
mate.
And you're at the Roosters, SG ball, and your best mate's at South. And you've just delivered some gold that, like I said at the start of this show, is I like to think, how can this help someone else? If there's someone listening that needs to give a good friend some honest feedback, it's done with love. Like you actually said, he basically held me to account that I'm letting the school team down because I'm not fit enough. And I think that influence on you has helped you in your whole life. Alan, he's no longer with us, but there's an influence in that because you have no problem with telling people and holding people to account along the way, and you've managed a lot of people and you've developed a lot of people, a lot of successful people. That is a topic that comes up a lot when we have some chats, is how to have that tough conversation. If it's supported by a foundation of trust and a level of trust, you use the word love, that tough conversation shouldn't really be tough. It's actually an opportunity to get better. You look back at that now, that's a huge moment in your life.
Oh, it was crushing.
Yeah.
Crushing, which
at the time was crushing. Now you realise that he loved
gold. You know, they say that it takes a lot of pressure to make a diamond out of coal. I was a piece of coal at that time, and he crushed me down to make a diamond, mate. And
that's such a good story.
It was hard to manage.
Can we have that photo?
It was hard.
We need to get the photo. I love the way we keep going to different stories because there's nuggets of gold everywhere. But we got the first impression bit out of the real estate that you ended up very successful in. But you stopped the real estate. What happened after that?
Well, I sort of, the company was going in a different direction to me. I mean, the actual company floated, and I didn't agree with it at the time. Having said that, also, I wanted a new challenge as well, and I was investing in companies that I'd liked, and it was sort of whilst I was in real estate, and it was sort of a hobby. And then that became a sort of, a job, and part of the real estate thing, I love meeting people like you, mate, and I drill down into certain companies and ring CEOs and brokers and talk about, what their next steps were and all that sort of stuff. And if I liked it, I'd invest in it. The other side of that too is I've been offered jobs with various companies, and I've taken a couple of them on. One of them is the Carver with Fiji, and went over there recently, as you know, and had a great time. And I love Fijian people, mate. I've always loved Fijian people. They're just humble, talented, sweet people that are hardworking, and as you said, the athletes, for the population, and the number of athletes they churn out. You were shocked when I told you there was less than 1 million people in Fiji. You know what I mean? And look at the athletes that come out of it, Korobetti and
Viliami Kikau. I've had some experiences with some great Fijians. I love them, but Viliami Kikau, Apikara sounds Fijian. we did an episode on here with Viliame Kikau, and
He's one of my favourite players.
He taught me a little bit of Fiji, and we spent a few years together. But
oh, really?
But hearing, in fact, you'll love this. I know we keep digressing, but he told me when he grew up, they used to put sand and grass and dirt in an empty bottle, and that became their ball to play with. That's what they play. So I love learning about people's stories and how they grew up and stuff. So there's a little game that I play. Driscoll loves this little game I play, 4-on-2 in a small area, and I call it, I basically saw the Fijian Sevens do something similar, so I kind of stole the idea of this game, and the players love it. It brings so much energy to a group. So we call it Fiji, and anyway, I ended up calling it, named it after Kicks, and the day after I learned of his story, I went and, instead of putting the balls out, I went and filled some plastic bottles with dirt and grass and stuff. And I said, we're going to play this game today, boys. And and the athleticism this game develops, but the energy and the fun, it's just, you have to name it after Fijians. That's just how they are. But listening to Kikau's story, he's one of the best. And there is an episode on, I should send it. There is an episode we did with him that you would love. But yeah, so you've gone in all these different businesses. You do a heap of charity stuff. Why?
I suppose, you want to take it right back to John Ireland, channeling his energy. He's always a giving guy. I mean, I'd heard stories from his daughter about the fact that, he'd go around, collect cans of food and all this sort of stuff, and he'd have the big station wagon, and then his daughter was telling me that one night they rang him because they couldn't get a cab, and it picked them up from some club, and there's 4 or 5 girls in the back of this big van when they were teenagers. So John had got to get up at 12:30, picking these girls up from this club and driving them all home. And in the midst though of all of that in the story was the fact that there were all these tins of baked beans and soup and all this sort of stuff rattling around in the back as a kid. Put the brake on the soup and the tins would fall over, and they had to put them back in the. What's that for, Dad? Oh, I collected these. They're from the supermarket. There's stock they don't want, and I deliver them to, people in need and all. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, really? Well, that's incredible. So from that, mate, that's why I do it. I just think that Driscoll particularly, I've said to him. And he's cooked today, right? So, yes. And I said to him a couple of weeks ago, and I've said it to his wife, he does too much. And he with the silk tails, I got involved in them probably 4 years ago when he was trying to build that high performance facility at the side of Daceyville PCYC. Yes. And he's arm wrestling with the council, he's arm wrestling with builders and all this sort of stuff, and the actual PCYC itself. And I was listening to him and I were training. I'm listening. He's on the phone and he's getting all these emails, and this is just aside from his work,
his actual work,
and his family,
yes,
and all this sort of stuff. So that John Ireland channeling, empathy and charity and all that sort of stuff. I'm thinking this guy's doing great stuff. Let's see if we can try and fast track it. So I made a couple of calls. I didn't do a hell of a lot. But I helped Steve cut through a lot of the red tape and BS that's out there, all the politics, and then subsequently got to a point where he built this facility. He built this facility for these guys, and it's just been a great, community, a great community triumph, I think, for that area, the Fijian people's. Assimilating into that Daceyville club and the area itself, and welcoming the very welcoming Fijian people. Actually, I had them here.
I saw a video.
Yeah. I had them at our house.
You had the Fijian team at your house.
Yeah, and I sort of thought, I said to my wife, we've been to Fiji a number of times and they're so bloody nice.
Welcoming.
I mean, why don't we just get them, be part of the group of people that welcomes to Australia by bringing them into our home and showing them that, we're like that too. Aussies are like that,
Yes.
So they really appreciate it. But Driscoll's just him and Petro and Terry Glassy and, a handful of other people have done a phenomenal
Great,
job with
yeah.
the silktails. I was just over at Fiji with them not so long ago. And, Wesley Nagama's just been coaching them,
Yes.
he's just, he's done such a great job. That whole group of people has been phenomenal. It really has. And then that sort of segues into a lot of the other stuff he does. With the flag team, a good mate of mine, Dean Feeney's coaching them, and Terry's part of the flag side as well, and Steve.
Yeah.
There's this moving
crew,
group
yeah.
of incredible, giving sort of human beings that are passing on their knowledge and their spirit to all these young people.
Yes.
It's invaluable, mate.
In and amongst this chat, though, I don't know if listeners feel it, but I try to just talk about you, and you've raised millions for charity. And you're just a typical leader of people that want to build other people up. I'm trying to talk about you, and then we've just talked about all these other people, how humble you are. So I have to go there then, and you have to talk about yourself. The Kings, the award you got, explain that. So what is that?
Mate, it's
the
Order of Australia.
Order of Australia medal, and it's, explain to me. I mean, I obviously know it's got to be the highest honour, but why did you get it, and what does it mean to you?
Well,
and tell us the day you knew you were getting it, or just give me some story around this.
It's an interesting one, mate. Like, I got an email 5 weeks out. I think it's just the 10th of June was the King's birthday. So 5 weeks prior to that, I got an email, and I looked at it and I thought, I suspect, like a lot of people are, someone's G'ing me up, got this water in it, and it was.
It's quite an honour.
Yeah, well, it is, and I'm, very grateful, but I looked at it and I sort of thought, and the thing that really was a real sort of, smack in the face in terms of the reality of it was what it was for service to youth, which is sort of where I'm at, like as a person, in terms of, mate, if young people think there's no future, guess what? There's no future, because they're the next group coming through in the population. And we talked about my brother, and I lost him, a number of years ago. But I have a philosophy, mate. Like we all get a turn at that. So my brother lived, and I'm segueing a little bit, but he lived about 10 lives in one. He was a lawyer. He was a whole host of things, mate. He was a great athlete. Played for the Roosters.
Great boxer.
Good boxer.
Great boxer. I've seen photos
and a
of
good
him.
bloke, mate.
Yeah.
When we said goodbye to him at St Mary's Cathedral, I spoke and I looked at the crowd. The place was packed. Like the whole. And I don't know if you've been to St Mary's Cathedral, but it's hard to fill it up. Right. And it was just a testament to him as a human being that there were so many people actually turned up. And there were some people spilling out at the side as well. So it was a life well lived from my perspective for him, and I love him dearly. And what I do know is that one day I'll be there, and I've got to hopefully that we all meet up at some point in the end, and we're all playing, touch footy with a glass bottle and dirt and grass in it,
or boxing him.
Or
sparring.
boxing.
Sparring.
So with the award, I sort of thought, I looked at it and I think, well, wow, and I sort of kept it to myself, and I thought I'm going to surprise my wife, right? So I'm not going to say anything. And then, a week out, what they do is they say, well, if we give you this award, would you accept it? And then you tick the box and say you accept it, and you send it back, and they go, okay, well, we're thinking about it, right?
Yes.
So, and then 4 weeks later, I get this thing to say, it's approved, you're getting it, and we're sending all the list of names out to the media, and you might be contacted. So I thought, okay. Next thing you know, I got a couple of the papers ring me. I think it was the Herald and the Telly, and they wanted a quote. I said, "That's cool. Look, really grateful, happy, blah blah blah." And then Channel 9 rings me and says, "We want to interview you down at the PCYC." And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I did that interview, and then this is 3 or 4 days beforehand. So I thought to myself, I got a bit nervous. I thought I better tell the kids, because my daughter's in Victoria at school at the moment. and my son is here, and I thought I better tell them, right?
Tell them before they see it on the
see it
TV.
on TV and think, oh, what's that? What's going on here, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I rang my daughter. I said, listen, this is what's happening. I said, oh wow. And my father-in-law is quite, when I say quite, he's an incredibly successful person in business.
Yeah.
And my daughter said, oh, you've got one up on Pop for a change. Finally, my moment in the sun, right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
And I said to my son, who was a bit ambivalent about it all, I said, oh, mate, you got this? And he said, oh, yeah, good on you, Dad. I was like, yeah, what's for dinner? I was like, okay. So I'm sitting on this now.
So wife still doesn't know.
Wife still doesn't know. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to play it cool. You know, so Monday comes to King's birthday. You know, what I didn't know was that Channel 9 had an affiliation with, I think, Sky News. And then this came on early morning, the actual interview came on early morning at Sky News. And then my phone started going ballistic. Bing, 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 congratulations. Oh, mate, you know, let's meet, you know, at 7 o'clock for a workout, and we'll have a cup of coffee and celebrate. We've got half a dozen mates. So I went down there at 7 o'clock, and I'm thinking, my wife doesn't know anything yet.
Still doesn't know.
Still doesn't know. I go down there, have a workout. I come home, and I'm sort of, you know, how are you? You know, nothing. Looking at me, yeah, good. How was it? Yeah, good. So I sit down and I have a cup of coffee, and I'm sort of watching TV, watching the news and stuff. And I'm thinking, oh, the penny's got to drop. So it's now 9 o'clock. Nothing's happening. And anyway, finally, ping. She looks at the phone. She goes, oh, takes a deep breath. I thought, this is the moment, right?
Yes.
Oh my God. She goes, Order of Australia, King's birthday. I'm looking at her, yeah. She goes, Dad got the Order of Australia. Her father.
Got one on the
My
same
father
day.
On the same day. I'm thinking, and she doesn't know I've got one yet. And I'm sitting there going, is this real?
So
this
she's
has
like,
gotta be
so much for having something up on Pop.
it didn't work out. It's never worked out, to be frank. But and he's a great guy, and my mother-in-law's brilliant, and the whole family's fantastic. I'm just really grateful there as well. But and he's a phenomenal human being, this bloke. But
So when they give the awards, yours was for service to youth. What was his for?
his was for you know, business achievement and philanthropy.
Right.
He's given a lot quietly to a lot of various charities. Not a lot of people would know about. You know, again, well deserved, but you know, the timing could have been a year later.
Yes,
right?
let you have the moment.
Give me a chance. So I'm still sitting here on the couch, right?
She still doesn't
Still
know.
doesn't know. It's just, you know, yeah. And I'm thinking, well, so, you know, this is impressive that Dad got this. I said, yeah, no, it's a prestigious award, you know.
Yeah.
I said, it's very important. She goes, oh, you know, not many
people
Australians
get
get this. I said, yeah, I know. I said, it's great that he's been recognised. And anyway, to cut a long story short, it gets worse. So her phone rings and her friend rings up and she goes, oh, just wanted to congratulate you and James. James got the Order of Australia. She must have seen the news.
Yes.
And my wife sort of turns around and goes, oh, no, James didn't get it. Dad did.
Dad got
I'm thinking,
I did.
and then she looked at me, and then the news came on finally, and she said, did you get it as well? I said, yeah, I did. It's weird, isn't it? Like, it's weird that well, your father got one, I got one. And it didn't seem as impressive when I got it.
So did you have a family celebration, you and the father-in-law?
Well, we haven't yet, but they were actually overseas at the time.
Right.
And what happens now, and it hasn't happened yet, is they call it an investiture ceremony, where you actually get your medal and all that sort of stuff up at Parliament House. So
Right.
we're all going up and sort of, you know,
That'll be a good family day.
it's just so weird and wonderful, mate. Which is sort of my life, really.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about father-in-law, I always refer on this show, talk to anyone old. That's been a message that was delivered to me a long time ago by a great coach, Kevin Sheedy, actually an AFL coach.
Oh, wow. I met him.
Yeah, I was privileged one night.
Giants.
Yeah, well, he at this time he was down in Essendon, and I flew down with Brian Smith at the time who I was working with, and I always have this thing: you do some of your best learnings, like me and you now, over a coffee,
100%.
or over a meal, or a beer, or whatever.
Yeah.
So we went out to dinner with Kevin Sheedy, and out of all the stuff we discussed, there's a lot of things, a lot of wisdom he shared. But one of the things he said: talk to anyone old. because if they died tomorrow, the information dies with them.
Yeah.
So unless they've written a book, this was what he said back then. Where now it's like there's so many ways, podcasts, content, there's so many ways other than a book now where you can share some wisdom. But he always said, talk to anyone old. And I realised I actually already did that. It was instilled in me from my father, who was a coach. And I was actually doing it at the time. I was talking to Kevin, who was older. But for 20 odd years, I've gone around, even around the world, to learning off different people, a lot of older people in the coaching space. And for you, is there that, I mean, there's obviously father-in-law, I'm sure you've drawn on for advice before and mentoring. Is there any, if I asked you of older people that, we mentioned John a bit earlier, but is there people in your life that have taught you something that you could share now that's helping someone else? Is there any other people? We've mentioned some keys. We've mentioned your best mate when you were 17. We've mentioned John, the CEO of a hospital. We've mentioned, I'm sure, is there any lessons from your father-in-law, or is there people in your life that have influenced you that we could finish the episode with, and some little nuggets of gold that will help someone else?
Well, you know, you talk about your wife and clear your light up, and you know, you get that support. My wife she's got an MBA, she speaks French, she speaks Japanese, she's incredibly intelligent, wonderful mother, and like a really great partner. Like we get on really well. She's we laugh a lot and all that sort of stuff. I think that's important in your life. We've been married, you know, almost 25 years, and it's been a great journey. And it sort of gets, you know, in my mind at least, probably have to speak to her, but it's getting better. But you know, she might have a different view. But to answer your question, there's a bloke called Dennis Cleary. When I was a kid, that boxing room was a real sort of, you know, a lot of darkness and a lot of light. You know, there was a lot of moments that were quite tragic and a lot of moments that were quite brilliant, all in the same day, you know, in some instances. And just as a kid, some of the people that have come through it, you know, there are all sorts of weird and wonderful stories that come out of it. But Dennis Cleary, when I was a kid, you know, I'd be sort of pretending to train and just look around at everybody and seeing the dynamic. And it was on some days it was quite frightening to see that you know, you had guys like you know, Tony Mundine, you know, Anthony's father, training there, and like just to see these like Tony Mundine was like a god.
Yes.
You know, and I'm like a kid on a skipping rope watching this guy. You've ever seen an athlete and a beautiful mover, like in terms of boxing and just an athlete in general, and you know, you look at a bloke like Tony Mundine in that moment, and I'm there physically. There's no video of it. But like the video's inside my head,
yes,
and I can replay it any time I want. They're obviously called memories, and I'm big on memories. You know, you talk about Danny Green. I did the Sydney to Hobart. There's a funny story there. I don't know if we've got time.
We've got time. We have to.
Yeah. Well, I'll get back to that with Greeny, but you know, Dennis Cleary was, and Bruce Collins for that matter, whom I'm still good friends with. Even when I was a kid, they were a lot older.
Yes.
They were the type of people, you know, so Bruce Collins got the Order of Australia, fought in Vietnam, did some stuff that, you know, people wouldn't want to do, but are very grateful that he did,
yes,
right, back in those days. And that's one person. And the other bloke, like Dennis Cleary, his brother was Michael Cleary. Michael Cleary played on the wing for Souths in all those, you know...
A sprinter as well.
Correct.
Went to the Commonwealth Games, I think.
I think he went to the Olympics as well. I think the Olympics as well.
Yeah, we need him on the show.
Yeah,
one of the greats.
I saw Michael out at the footy stadium not that long ago.
Yeah.
And so the last game that the Roosters played at the footy stadium against Souths, we won. And the first game ever played at the new Allianz Stadium, we won.
There you go.
Bang.
There you go. You had to go back to the rivalry.
I saw Michael Cleary out there, but Dennis he's had a few health issues, and you know, we picked him up and had a cup of coffee with him. But when I was a kid, I'd see blokes like him and Tony Mundine and all this stuff. And Dennis had a job. You know, he worked for Macquarie Bank, and he was the sort of guy you wanted to be. He was incredibly well spoken. He was intelligent. He was, you know, numbers smart and book smart. and dressed incredibly, impeccably, like,
Yeah.
you know. And he's the sort of guy, when he had this booming voice, he goes, you know, almost like Ray Warren, you know.
Yeah.
I've got an appointment with the Prime Minister on Tuesday. I've got lunch. Dacky, what are you doing? Mate, I'm riding my bike home. What are you know, so this guy's like the golden god.
Yeah.
And it's clear. And
Yeah.
you sort of look at him and you think, well, smart, hard-working, well-dressed, incredibly well-spoken, and comes into this gym, let's say, where this eclectic group of people, you know, you got and I'm still good friends with most of them, you know, the guy who works on the back of the garbage truck and the guy here that works on the quarry bag and everything in between.
Yeah.
Everything in between. And some of the athletes and some of the lessons you learn, and some of them was quite brutal. I mean, some of the people that had, and they get moved out pretty quickly. You know, if you're not, if you haven't got empathy for the opponent who's less skilled than you, then you know you're moved on very quickly. And had some situations there were quite unpalatable, which and as I say, it's like sorting the weed out from the chaff. It gets sorted out very quickly. Those people aren't invited back. So, but in the moment when you see it and it happens, and it's just quite like, you know, is this happening? You know, in front of your eyes.
So he had a big influence on you
A
then?
huge influence, mate. You know, everyone wanted to be like Dennis. Everyone, you know, so the big job, the come in and good athlete, strong, big voice.
Would he be someone during your career in business that you'd reach out to for a bit of mentoring?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like I'm so massive personally, which I now try to share through this podcast. He's learning off, just by talking, learning off so many leaders around the world in different industries. Did you deliberately go and do that? Did you pick up the phone and just bounce stuff over?
When I got the job, you know, I applied for the job. I remember back in the day, as the payroll manager at St Vincent's, and you know, I was numb in the interview, numb from the point of view I was scared to death, and I was sort of scared to death that I might get the job, because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do it. But I must have put on a reasonable show, because there were half dozen people who went for it. I got the job and I thought, oh, what am I going to do? So what I did, I worked out from the time that I'd met, you know, these other people that worked in other payroll offices who managed the bigger, you know, staff numbers in other hospitals that were the payroll. I'd ring them. Yeah. And then I'd ring the people that ran the payroll services, and I'd get all the answers from them. So what I was doing was, I didn't know how to do something, so I went to someone who knew how to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So bloke like you, if someone doesn't know how to do something like, you know, the fast twitch hip flex, how to move your feet in the ruck, they go to you, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how to do it. So I worked that out, that any time I never knew how to do something, I went to someone that I knew how to do it and do it well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I identified that and then went to them, and hopefully they will share that information, which thankfully I have been very lucky with people that have been sharing that information with me, and I became pretty good at it, you know, because I was actually using other people as the conduit to my success.
Yes.
But they were grateful enough. They were gracious enough to be able to give me the information I needed.
And because I've seen now you do a lot of now helping other people that reach out to you for mentoring. I've noticed a bit of that.
Well,
that's just you. That's just.
Well, I think that it's born out of what you learn and how you were, you know, not all the time, but you know, how you were treated by really good people. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, I've seen you in the gym. I've seen what you do to people. You want to genuinely. I've seen you do it. I've heard about you. You know, you want to bring people up, and you do. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's something that's inside. It's inside you. It's in your DNA. You have to have it in your DNA. You have to learn it from other people, and then subsequently reproduce it. But that's the essence of life, mate. Because, you know, as I said to you before, my philosophy is you're here for a certain period of time, from A to Z, and all the alphabet in between. You've got to actually have experiences for yourself. You've got to, you know, give to others, and end up. You know, that's how the success plays out. You know, all the things you do between A and Z, And there's no dodging the fact that we all get an ending.
Yes.
You know, there's no dodging it. I think the realisation, I had that realisation, I think I mentioned to you when I was 12 years old. And it came to me in a really brutal way where I was chosen at junior school to sit for a scholarship which would have paid for my secondary education. And mate, I got electrocuted, almost got killed.
Nearly died.
And then I spent months in hospital, and I couldn't do the things I used to be able to do. I'd pick up a book and I'd read it like in half the time anybody else could.
Yes.
And I was like just a sponge for information, just bang, 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 bang. But I couldn't do that anymore. So it became a more, and the fact of the matter, mate, when I went over, my mother took me out to hospital. I had holes in my fingers from the burn from the, and the only reason I was let off the hook, so to speak, from the charge of the electricity was I had rubber-soled shoes on. Now, the first thing the doctor did was took my shoes off and looked at the bottom of my feet, even though I had holes in my fingers, because what happens is the charge goes through you, comes out your feet. But since I had rubber-soled shoes on, it stopped that because it's not a conductor. Yeah. So he said to me, "You were a very lucky boy. You're a very lucky boy. You had those sand shoes on because you wouldn't be here, mate." And I thought, I took that information and I thought to myself, I'd lay in bed in the hospital for months, and I'd listen to I listened to the radio. It was quite good actually. It was some of the tunes on I sort of learned the songs. It was quite relaxing, to be honest with you. And I listened. I replayed in my mind what the doctor said, and then I formed the view that how lucky I was, and I was just relaxing in the bed. I was recovering, and the radio on, and my mother had come and visit me, and la 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 la, and then I just got myself back into the groove of life again. But it was a very different person, mate. I was a different person.
Wow.
I was more spiritual than hard-hitting sort of, intellect, because
to experience that at 12.
Oh, mate, it was.
To realise
it was heavy. It was heavy, but somehow, mate, I bounced out of it.
Right, we could talk for hours, but we have to go there because Danny Green's a mutual contact. Greeny's done an episode on here before. I'd spent many great years with him, and he shared some great wisdom, even from his own father, who worked for your father-in-law, Snowy.
Malcolm.
You would have met Malcolm.
I met Malcolm, yeah.
Yeah, he was a great man, and Greeny shared some stuff around, even just as simple as just surround yourself with good people. That's probably the message Malcolm gave Danny. And I'd like to think I may have been a good person around Greeny for a period of his career.
How long were you with him, mate?
Yeah, for about 6 years. We went through some
mate,
great
I'll tell
time.
you now, Greeny's a bit like a lot of people I know. If you're not who you say you are, and he'd look at you for a couple of days or a week and he'd be cut.
Yeah,
6 years with him is like.
Well, we had some great times. And he won some world titles in there, but he did the Sydney to Hobart, and he talks about it with fond memories. And we've been chatting and found out you did it with him.
Well, mate, I was the reason he did it.
Were you?
Yeah. So I met him at a lunch a little while previously, and we became sort of mates from that.
Yeah.
And I loved him. He's so full of life, as a person.
Yeah.
And a mate of mine bought a boat out of New Zealand called Maximus, and the funny thing about the boat that came out of New Zealand. And the guy that bought the boat out said, "Mate, you're the first one picked." And we spoke. And in my head, like, I always have these moments, Hayden, I don't know if you have, mate, but I see something that I want to do and I store it in the back of my mind. Yeah. And I know at some point it's going to be there and the opportunity will present itself, and then it's a matter of whether you're ready to take it or not. So I'm thinking I saw the Sydney to Hobart probably 10 or 15 years prior to the time I did it. And I thought to myself, I really want to do that. That looks really challenging. It looks amazing. One of the most, dangerous sea journeys you can do. And I'm thinking in my head, I'd love to do that anyway. So this mate of mine buys this boat out of New Zealand called Maximus, and I think it started the race a couple of times. It didn't finish it, like it broke down.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking, oh my God. So rebadged bought the boat, made it. I thought, is this thing going to make it from New Zealand to Sydney? You know. So he bought the boat out, and then he said, look, what we need to do is get some people, that high profile types to raise some money for charity. I said, yeah. And he said, you know, who do you know? And I said, oh, you know, I know a couple of people, you know, Danny Green. He goes, oh, Danny Green. I said, yeah. He goes, you know him? I said, yeah, I know him. Anyway, Greeny happened to be fighting for a title at the same time against Roy Jones, right? So I'm talking to Greeny and and I said, listen, you are going to do the Sydney to Hobart with me. He said, you are joking. He said, mate, I am scared of sharks. He said, I know I surf and all that sort of stuff. He said, but there's no way in the world I'm going to do the Sydney to Hobart. I said, mate, you're going to do it with me. I said, I hate it as much as you do. I said, that means that we'll both do it and we'll have an interesting experience. And he goes, mate, there's no way in the world. So I rang him the next day and I said, mate, listen, we're going to do the Sydney to Hobart, right?
Yes.
He goes, listen, Dack, I've got a bid on. A bid on was actually fighting for a
world title.
Yeah, I got a bid on. I said, oh, look, I know you've got a bid on. I said, but this is after the event. I said, you'll do what you've got to do, and then after that is when the training starts and all the rest of it. And he goes, okay. He goes, look, you know, because I kept bugging him. He goes, look, give me the weekend to think about it and call me Monday, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, you know, I'm not going to call him Monday. In my head, I'm not calling him Monday. He's expecting me to call him Monday. And he goes, I call him Wednesday. And he goes, oh, I can't believe you called me Wednesday, mate. He said, in between Monday and now, I've changed my mind 100 times. And he said, now that you've called, I've landed on yes. He said, if you called me Monday, I would have said no. He said, you're a prick. You know, that's okay to say on this. He said, you're a prick. And I said, mate, I sort of thought that if I called you Monday, you were pretty hot on the no.
Yeah.
I said, but mate, if you might have cooled off and thought about it. So to cut a long story short, mate, he agreed to do it. It was a great trip. Loved doing it with him. He's courageous.
What was the charity for?
Oh, it was a whole host of charities, mate.
Okay.
So each individual person that raised money, the whole amount of money raised was split between the crew, and then they gave it to mine was the Matthew Talbot Hostel in Woolloomooloo. I don't know. I'm not sure what Greeny's was. You can ask him.
Yes,
I'll call him after this.
Yeah, he talks about it as a great experience in his life,
mate.
And
you know,
well, you're a good judge of character. If you had to describe Danny Green, forget about his boxing even, just that experience you had with him, because I know what I think of him. Describe Danny Green.
Loyal, fearless. He's a deep spiritual sort of a bloke. He's a thinker. So he is very careful about what he does, but when he makes a decision to do it, you know, he's a sort of bloke that won't let you down.
100%. How would you like people to describe you?
Well, you know, it's funny, mate. I've actually thought of this, and I thought about what my mother used to say to me, you know, and it's a term that I don't think people really think about, but even to say he was a gentleman, right? That's how I'd like to be described. Like he was a gentleman. You know, I haven't always been like that, mate.
Yes.
Like, you know, but having said that, that's how I'd like to be remembered. You know, they say that, you know, sometimes if you get a group of people in the room, the most aggressive person and the loudest person and the person that tries to intimidate people the most is the person that's the most scared.
Yes.
And if you look at that, and 9 times out of 10 from, you know, from my brother particularly, he was always really calm, you know, no matter what was going on. And I think that shows a degree of intelligence if you can remain calm in an environment. When someone flares up, if something goes wrong, then, you know, you can see from my perspective that there might be a bit of a character issue, you know. But if everyone's just calm, understands what they need to do and what to do or what the next part of the process is, then, you know, that to me is a gentleman.
100%. How would you like people to describe you?
Well, you know, it's funny, mate. I've actually thought of this, and I thought about what my mother used to say to me, you know. And it's a term that I don't think people really think about, but even to say he was a gentleman, right? That's how I'd like to be described. Like he was a gentleman. You know, I haven't always been like that, mate.
Yes.
Like, you know, but having said that, that's how I'd like to be remembered. You know, they say that, you know, sometimes if you get a group of people in a room, the most aggressive person and the loudest person and the person that tries to intimidate people the most is the person that's the most scared.
Yes.
And if you look at that, and the 9 times out of 10 from, you know, from my brother particularly, he was always really calm, you know, no matter what was going on. And I think that shows a degree of intelligence if you can remain calm in an environment. When someone flares up, if something goes wrong, then, you know, you can see from my perspective that there might be a bit of a character issue, you know. But if everyone's just calm, understands what they need to do and what to do or what the next part of the process is, then, you know, that to me is a gentleman.
You are a gentleman. Dacky, thanks so much for
My
that.
pleasure, mate.
That's so good.